Hey, welcome to Ask The Instructor. It is 12 noon on Wednesday, and that means we come to you live to answer your real estate related questions. I'm John Carissimo, and this show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. Folks, Tampa School of Real Estate is the only choice you want to make when choosing a real estate school. No other school is going to do more for your students than what we do, including shows like this. So today's topic that we're going to be discussing is on investment value, calculating value for investors. Now, if you guys are already following our Success Center, you might have saw the post I made this morning titled, I believe it was, Understanding What Investors Value. So investors, they're an entirely different animal than your typical residential real estate client, or what the lion's share of the real estate market actually makes up. It's quite a difference involved between these two different clients. So you can't have a one-size-fits-all type of approach for your residential clients and your investors. So today's episode, it's all going to focus on how to deal with real estate investors, particularly how to calculate investment value. This is a hot topic because calculating investment value, especially as we're going to be doing it for today with buy and hold type of investors, is going to be very different. So before we start talking about calculating this out, let's talk about why you'd want to work with an investor, because that's the important reason, is always starting with why. Why would you decide to work with an investor if you have to learn even more information? So sure, you have to have your skill set already for your residential clients, because that's where most people start in real estate. Why would you want to also work with an investor where you'll have to learn even more things? Well, let's do a little comparison here. So on this side, we'll put our residential clients. On this side, we'll put our investor. Now, what are the differences between dealing with a residential client and an investor client? Well, National Association of Realtor Statistics says that people buy a house every 5 to 7 years. So every 5 to 7 years, you get a transaction, potentially two transactions, the selling side and the buying side of the transaction. So two transactions, but the trick is you have to wait 5 to 7 years for that person to want to use your services again, which is a lot of follow-up on your part, a lot of staying in touch with them after the sale. It's definitely worth it, especially if you get both ends of the sale. A lot of money to be made there working with these same clients over and over again, and the beauty of this is, if they still remember who you are, you don't have to sell them again. But now there's that 5 to 7 year waiting period. So they may move quicker than this. This is just the U.S. statistic for how often people buy and sell homes. It's every 5 to 7 years. Every 5 to 7 years is going to be when people buy and basically move into a new house. So that's good, especially if you're looking to be in real estate long term. But if you're only getting paid every 5 to 7 years, that's really not good. Of course, you're going to need other clients. But now let's talk about the investor side of things. The investors, I mean, they could be buying 10 plus a year. They could be buying 10 plus properties per year, which is a huge difference. I mean, even let's say you have a client that's right there at the bottom end, maybe of the luxury market for $500,000. $500,000 let's say every about 5 years is going to give us, what, $2.5 million. So pretty good there. But now let's say we're working with an investor. Now the investor probably isn't going to be buying and selling $500,000 properties. Let's say it's going to be maybe where they're doing flips or something like that. Let's say that the average price is, let's say it's only $100,000. So 10 properties times $100,000 average price, that's $1 million right there, and that's a year. And now you multiply this out by 5 years for the same time frame that we were working with over here, and that's $5 million. So it's a big difference that could be made when you're working with these potential clients. So that's why you may want to consider working with investors. A couple of other reasons you may want to work with investors as well could be doing some sort of maybe property management. That's something where maybe they buy this house, but now they need somebody to find a renter, a tenant for it. Well, there you go. There's another stream of income. But it does require a different skill set working for the investor. So the money is definitely there to be made, but it's definitely a different skill set that you're going to have to learn and master. So today what we're going to be talking about is estimating value. So estimating value for an investor. The investors don't go by what's called market value. So real estate, residential real estate, goes by market value. Investors go by investment value. So again, we have our differences here. So we have market value for residential types of homes, and we have investment value for investors. It's a completely different type of clientele that you're working with a investor versus residential. And if you guys watching, if you know of anything that could be potentially different, I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. If you know of something that maybe makes a residential client, or maybe some of the investors that you've worked with before, what made them different that they're looking for, I'll tell you one of the things is, and this ties directly in with this investment value, their primary objective for an investor is going to be return on investment, this magic word of ROI. That's an acronym you definitely want to get to know. This is an investor's number one objective. Now, this ROI is going to be different. The return on investment is going to be different depending on whether we're dealing with a buy and hold type of investor that's looking to lease out the property over the long term. It could be different where we have something for an investor that's doing flips or wholesaling or all these different things. And then even then you have differences in multifamily housing versus retail plazas. These are all different, very different types of property, which your one real estate license allows you to practice in all these fields. But now the key is, if you really want to dominate your market, if you want to dominate the investment market, you're going to need some more investor knowledge, because investors, they're not just choosing you because you're a friend or family. That might be enough for the residential side of things. If your friends or this is a family member and they're like, hey, I need to sell my house. Oh, well, yeah, you're my friend, so I trust you to do it. That's fine for the residential side. But now when you're dealing with investors, they don't care that you're their friend or family. Yeah, maybe that'll get your foot in the door. But okay, yeah, you're my friend. Okay, now tell me what it is that you could do. What is it now? You're dealing with a business. Even if it's just a single investor, it's a business, as opposed to just dealing with somebody that's making a more leisurely type of purchase. On the residential side, this is where, like I said, if it's a friend, okay, yeah, I trust you. You're my friend. I know you know what you're doing. You got your real estate license. Great, we're good. On the investor side of things, on the other hand now, the investors, they're a little bit more particular. Great, you're my friend. Tell me how you could help my business. Tell me what you know. Tell me what properties you have. They're looking for a greater depth of information as opposed to residential. And again, you guys watching in, if you have any other differences between residential property and investment property, I'd love to hear it for you. Just put it in the chat. I have both the Facebook and the YouTube chats loaded up here where I could go ahead and monitor this stuff here. We do have a question actually coming in. So this is coming in on YouTube from Matt Fisher. Is there a better day of the week to take the state exam? Yes and no. Not particularly any day of the week. It really kind of depends on what you're going on, Matt. Matt, thanks for commenting. I really appreciate you sending in your comment. Now, as far as planning when to take your state exam, you want to plan this ahead of time, because it takes about 2 weeks or so to actually get your exam scheduled. Sometimes you get in there a little bit quicker. Sometimes it takes even longer than that, especially if you have a more particular type of schedule. So as far as a good day of the week to take your exam, it's not like they've rotated in different questions on different days. It's a completely randomized set of the question bank that they're giving you there. So Matt, my recommendation to you, as far as scheduling your exam to really make sure that you're going to perform at your greatest on that exam day, is to basically try to line it up with how you're studying. And you don't want to just do one day after doing a cram or something like that. That's great if you're taking one of our weekend review classes. We have a lot of people that take our weekend review classes and then go on and take on Monday or Tuesday the state exam, and that's perfect. That's probably the best scenario. But if you're not doing something like that, or maybe you're on one of our online study type of tools like the question bank or something along those lines, that's where you want to kind of budget in time to do every single day. But ultimately, the moral of the story really is this information is going to be easily forgotten. Is this Bo? Yes, this is still active. Bo, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sending in your comment. We're talking about the state exam. When's the best day to schedule it? You want to schedule this while the information is still fresh in your head. If you're taking one of our day classes are over in 2 weeks. So it's really quick that we're getting through the information. It starts and then it's over basically 14 days later, not even. It's only 8 days of actual class time. You start on Monday, you're done on the following Thursday, and you're ready to take your licensing exam. So you're going to learn all the information you need for your exam in the class, but the trick is, this is information that even for a real estate person, a real estate salesperson, or even a broker, this information doesn't come up in a daily kind of discussion and whatnot. So for all you guys commenting, thanks so much. I really do appreciate that. If you do have any more questions, I'll try to work those in for you. And again, my question, if you know of anything that could be different with a residential property versus an investor. So we're going to be calculating out investment value today. We're going to be talking about the differences between working with a residential property and working with an investment property, where we're dealing with a consumer versus we're dealing with a business. And really that's a big difference that we should just write down right here. We're dealing with a consumer on the residential side. On the investment side, we're dealing with a business typically. There are exceptions to this rule, but that's usually the type of person that we're dealing with. And if we want to specialize in working with residential property, that's where we need to gear ourselves towards the consumers. If we're dealing with investment, that's where we need to deal specifically more so with businesses. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. Stay with us, because when we come back, we'll maybe talk about a couple more differences here, but then we're going to actually get into calculating the value. I'm John Carissimo, and you're watching Ask the Instructor.
When you look back on your real estate career, you'll remember the moment you decided to begin this journey. The moment when you finally decided it was time for change. The moment when you decided it was time to take charge. The moment that changed the direction of your life forever. Now is that moment.
Hey, I'm John Carissimo, and I'm here to tell you about State of Real Estate. This show is going to be live every Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time, and this is going to be a show for you guys to chat in and get interactive live with us to help mastermind and build your real estate business. So make sure you tune in this Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time. Again, that's Fridays at noon Eastern Time. You can find the links in the description for this video. Look forward to hearing from you on Friday.
After the show, be sure to visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Again, that's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, where you'll find all the information you need to start your career in real estate. Also, be sure to check out our Success Center, where you'll find helpful tips for building a successful real estate career.
Hey, if you like the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching. Hey, welcome back to Ask the Instructor. Today's episode is focusing on investment value. So just in case you're just tuning in now, what we're talking about are the differences between residential and investment property, and we're about to get into actually calculating out some statistics that are going to be important to investors. If you want to work with investors in real estate, it's a very profitable niche to be in, because these investors, these are easily repeat customers. They're going to be coming to you time and time again if you know what you're doing and if you're valuable to them. That's very important. I posted an article on our Success Center this morning, and it's all about just in general dealing with investors and how they're different from working with a residential client, and what you need to do to show value in your real estate professional experience to your investors. So let's talk a little bit more about differences between residential and investment value. And if you guys are watching this, whether it's on YouTube or on Facebook, I am monitoring the chat on here. So if you know of any differences we have between residential and investment property, message that in and let me know. So let's focus more on the investment side of things, because this is what we're going to be talking about today. This whole episode is really all about working with investors. They're looking for this ROI, return on investment, and that's a big difference compared to what you're dealing with market value for residential consumers. There's all different types of properties you could be working with. You could be working with single-family homes still, not to say even if you're just dealing with investor properties, it still couldn't be residential property. There could be an investor that's just buying single-family homes and renting them out. Now, with the investors, these are typically lower dollar price if they're just buying single homes like this. But on the flip side of things, you also have a lot larger portfolios of property basically when you're dealing with investors. If you could tap into that higher end type of market, you have the retail plazas, which are huge. We're talking multi-million dollar deals. We have multifamily investment properties, which are also huge, also multi-million dollar types of deals. I mean, you could have deals that are over $30 million, and even if you're taking a discount on your commission, because it is such a large value in the price, that's still a huge payday that you could get. And the key is, if you show value and if you show your worth to these investors, they're going to want to use you again. They're going to want to use you again for their next $30 million deal or their next $100,000 deal. Typically, if it's these smaller properties, they might be buying them completely nonstop. They're just going and buying properties until they have more properties than they know what to do with. So let's talk about return on investment. We'll switch gears now more into just talking about investors. We kind of covered the differences. If you want to find out more about differences between investors and residential property, like I said, go on the Success Center, tampaschoolofrealestate.com/success, tampaschoolofrealestate.com/success. I posted an article there this morning. If you're not following this already, make sure you follow, because there's always great real estate information that we're putting out on there. And this morning I did an article specifically about the differences now when we're talking about real estate investors versus your residential type of property, and how you need to be different to serve your investors. So definitely check that out. But let's talk about ROI, return on investment. So this is what an investor wants to achieve. Now today we're going to be focusing a little bit more on the buy and hold type of strategy. The buy and hold type of strategy where you're basically buying properties, holding on to them, and leasing them out over time, which is a great way to earn recurring revenue. You don't make quite as much money right off the bat instantly. You don't get the instant gratification that you do when you're flipping a properties. It's not like you have a property, you go and sell it and get an easy $10,000 right there. You might only be getting a couple $100 a month, maybe only $50 a month. But if that's positive cash flow, that's a win in anybody's book when you have positive cash flow out of all these things after you go through and expenses. Don't forget to factor in the time for your investors as well. That's maybe more so where the property management aspect comes in with this. This could be a service that you're offering. You could be offering them property management as well. So in between the closings, you're actually still there to collect a fee every single month that rent is being paid. Good for the investor because they make sure somebody's managing the property, and good for you and your business because you ensure that you have recurring revenue as opposed to just relying solely on closings for the properties to actually go through. So property management is a great field to actually get into. We're actually going to do another show on this talking more about property management and some of the intricacies with that. So let's get back to return on investment. So this is basically a fancy way of saying the percent investor wants. And we're typically dealing with this on an annual basis. So our return investment is how much percent of the money that the investor is going to get back. So if the investor invests $100,000, if that investor wants a 10% return, then that investor is going to be looking to get every year $10,000 out of this. So that's some basic math basically, and we're going to actually work through and solve this, and I'm going to show you the formulas and the terms that you need to know in case you are taking your real estate exam. This is definitely information that's on your real estate exam, and again, this is more information that's on the course, that's on the exam, that is information that you could use in the real world, especially when you have a thorough understanding of this. That's going to show a lot of value to your investor clients. So this is basically our breakdown of some sample math here. So that kind of explains what we're looking for. With an investor that's looking to make a return on investment, it depends on what that percent of return may be. If they want a 10% return and they invested $100,000, that's $10,000 year over year that they want to get as a return on their investment. And there's more ways to spread this out that it gets a little bit more complicated than this. And the more you work with these numbers, the more you can kind of break this down for your investor clients. So now in order to figure out what this return on investment or whether or not a property lines up with a return on investment, that article I did this morning on our Success Center, like I said, tells you a lot of great information. What you want to do, if you're brand new to working with investors, or maybe you're not even brand new working with investors, but you want to work with real estate investors, what you need to do is get an understanding of what that investor is looking for. You need to be able to speak their language. Real estate has a whole language in and of itself, and investment is like a dialect of the real estate language. So investment is a very specific niche where there's different terms that you'll use with an investor that you won't necessarily use with a residential client. You really won't mention return on investment or ROI when we're dealing with a residential type of client where they're just buying a home for them to live in. With an investor, they want return on their investment. And where this can get things even more different is an investor maybe so much doesn't care exactly about where the property is located. They just care if the property could be in the worst neighborhood in the world, but if they're getting a strong return on investment and they're okay with that property being there, then they'll be all for it. They'll probably buy 10 properties in that neighborhood if they're getting a strong return on investment. But then vice versa, you might have the most desirable neighborhood in the world, but if it doesn't make sense investment-wise, say if we're dealing with multi-million-dollar types of properties, it's a lot harder to lease those out than it is with lower value types of properties. Not to say it can't be done, because there's all kinds of multi-million-dollar properties that do get leased out for ridiculous amounts of money month over month, but it's a lot tighter of a niche market. A lot of money to be made, but a very small market. As most of your investors, they're going to be dealing maybe in homes that are $200,000 and under if they're dealing with single-family homes. Again, if we're dealing with multifamily apartment complex and things like that, it's going to get much larger. But for a typical investor, your starter investor that's maybe looking just to buy a couple properties or just buy a single property and try out this whole real estate investment thing, you want to be their guide, their shepherd essentially into this real estate investment world. I know a lot of agents that have actually turned clients, just residential clients, into investors, maybe taking some of the equity out of their house and taking that and turning around and getting into real estate investment. If you really know what you're doing with real estate investment, you could definitely do that. So let's talk now about how to figure out what this ROI could be, because it's great to understand what ROI is, but that's just really the surface level of understanding this for investors. Now, this is something called the income approach or the income capitalization approach, and this is in the pre-licensing course. This is on your state exam, so make sure you know everything and anything you can about the income capitalization approach, because I guarantee you on almost every single exam this should be a question that will come up. It's one of the highly tested on types of questions, mainly because there's so many questions they could actually ask on this. So in order to figure out what the income would be for the property, basically we have to kind of describe this, and I like to describe it as a funnel. And in this funnel, basically, we have our money getting funneled out to our investor. It's basically working its way through out to our investor. But why is the money getting smaller? What's going on that's causing this money to decrease in this funnel? And that's in the form of expenses. And this is something that an investor is going to care about looking at. They want to know what the expenses are going to be for the property to know how this translates into how much output it is that they're getting at the end of this funnel. And this is a great way to explain it to clients, especially people that are new to investing. This really makes a lot of sense with this funnel, but it'll also help you when you're taking your exam for remembering these different types of income. So our first bucket of income, our biggest bucket of income, is called potential gross income. Now that's abbreviated as PGI. So PGI stands for potential gross income. And that's our first bucket of income. Now let's talk about what PGI represents, what this potential gross income represents. So this is our largest bucket of income, and to kind of simplify this is a little bit of an oversimplification here, but what we're going to do is figure that we have a 4-unit property. We have a quadplex. So we have 4 units here. And let's say that we're in the position, maybe it's ourselves, because I recommend if you're trying to work with investor clients, get to know these facts and figures, because this is the stuff that they're going to want to look at. They want to know what the net income is going to be and what kind of return on investment they could potentially get. So make sure you understand and know how to work with all of these numbers. But again, it's also going to be on your exam if you haven't taken that quite yet. So very important for you to know. So again, we're imagining we have a quadplex here. And we're looking at this quadplex and we're trying to figure out how much money we could potentially generate. How much we could potentially generate. Potential gross. The term gross, this is a very common accounting term. And what gross means is before expenses. So gross means we're not dealing with expenses. It means the expenses are not factored in. We're just dealing with what our total revenue is that's being generated from leasing out this property, or total money that's flowing into us. Now you can remember this, the term gross, because this is gross. This is going to be a high number, and then once we take out our expenses, it's a lot lower. So that's pretty gross. No one really likes that, to see that the money's being taken out with expenses. So this is a gross number, meaning the expenses are still factored in, and expenses are gross. Typically, investors want to minimize the expenses that they have. So that's a good way to remember what that term gross means. It means expenses are not included. And if you're taking your exam, that term gross shows up quite a bit. So make sure you know gross means no expenses. Expenses are not included. So for our potential gross income, and if you break down these acronyms, if you break down these words, it tells you exactly what it means. We're dealing with how much potential this property has to generate. So let's say that this unit could rent out for $1,000. This unit could rent out for $1,000. This unit could rent out for $1,000. And this one could rent out for $1,000. Again, we're dealing with a little bit of an oversimplification here, but basically what we're looking at here is these 4 units. Each unit could potentially rent out for $1,000 a month. Now, whenever we're dealing with incomes, again, investors want to look at this as an annual basis. They don't really care so much about the monthly rent, or they want to know what this equates to at the end, at least especially if they're really relying on you as the real estate professional, or at least for you to explain how this is all going to kind of come out. So what we have to do is take these monthly incomes and multiply each by 12. So this unit has the potential to generate $12,000 a year. This unit has the potential to generate $12,000 a year. All of them, they're all identical units, so they all have the potential, and that's our key word here, potential to generate, or potential to gross $12,000 a year. So we have this potential across these 4 properties, $12,000 out of each one of them here, so that gives us a total PGI of $48,000. So our PGI is $48,000. Now we're going to move down to our next bucket of income. And this is our EGI. So PGI is our largest bucket of income. EGI is our next lower bucket of income. This is what we're funneling this down to. The money is going to get smaller as we work through this funnel. We're going to be going from our $48,000 a year of potential gross income. Now we're taking something out to get to effective gross income. Well, again, if we break down these words, it'll tell us. So we have the G in there. That stands for gross. So we're still dealing with before expenses. So what could we be taking out that's not an expense? Well, we have to think of where we started off from. Where we started off is a flawed thinking. We're not going to generate $48,000 a year on this property unless it's a perfect world, and very rarely does that ever happen. Why are we not going to generate $48,000? Because we might not rent out all 4 units at the same time, all the time. That's what this number is calculating. It's if all 4 of these units are renting out 100% of the time, and on top of that, each tenant is paying their rent on time. There's no collection losses. We call these vacancy and collection losses. So vacancy and collection losses is going to be the amount of money that we're losing every single month. So the amount of money that we're losing every single month is going to be our vacancy and collection losses due to vacancies and collections. So that's what we're taking out to go from PGI to EGI. We subtract out our V and C. V and C stands for vacancy and collection losses. We go from our potential to gross down to our effective to gross, and in order to figure that out, we have to subtract out our vacancy and collection losses. So let's say for this particular problem, we're going to have 10% vacancy and collection losses. So that means basically we're going to lose 10% of this money due to vacancies or collection losses. So again, we're not going to rent out all 4 of these units every single time. So we might lose some money to vacancies. We might lose some money to collections, where maybe they're in there and we have to evict them and get them out of the property. So we have to take out these V and C's, the vacancy and collection losses. So what we're going to do to solve this now, to figure out what our EGI is take this $48,000 and multiply by 0.90. Now, why am I multiplying by 90, by 0.90, by 90%? The reason is this is going to tell us how much money we get after we take out the 10%. So we have our 100%, we subtract 10%, which is what we're losing, and we're left with 90%. So we have 100% is the total. That was our PGI. Our 10% is our loss, and our 90% is our EGI. So we go from our 100% total gross income to total potential gross income. We take out our 10% loss, and we're left with 90% being our EGI. So to calculate this out, we'll go ahead and just whip out our handy-dandy calculator here. Always use your calculator, even if it's a simple calculation, because especially if you're taking your exam, you're going to look like you don't know what you're talking about to your clients. You're going to get wrong answers. Just use your calculator, and you'll be sure about this. So we're going to take our $48,000, multiply by 0.90, and we get $43,200. So our potential gross income was $48,000, but that potential gross income banks on all 4 of these properties being rented out 100% of the time, which, folks, that's simply not going to happen really ever. Maybe you'll get lucky and find a unicorn type of property where it is renting out 100% of the time for all the units and you're not having any collection losses and it's a perfect world and you have the best investment property in the world. Congratulations, you hit the investment lottery. But that very rarely ever happens. So you're usually going to have vacancy and collection losses. If you're doing this as an exam question, you will have vacancy and collection losses you'll have to factor in. And that'll bring our EGI down to $43,200 as opposed to our $48,000 we were initially working with. So we're working our way down the funnel. And this last number, this is the number that the investors really want to know. And this is our net operating income. So our net operating income, this is our smallest bucket of income. This is essentially what we're going to be left with once we take out our vacancy and collection losses. And now we have to take out one more thing. So we went down one step here to go from PGI to EGI. Now we have to go down another step to get from EGI to NOI. So now what are we removing at this point? Now we could take out our expenses. How do we know we're taking out expenses at this point here? The reason why we know we're taking out expenses is we're dealing now with a net number. The term net, just like not, N-E-T and O-T, with my terrible handwriting, they probably look like the same thing to you here, but we have net and not. And what is it not? It's not expenses. So net means not expenses. Your gross income includes expenses. Remember, that's gross because the expenses are still factored in, and that's not the number we want, so that's a gross number. But our net income is not expenses. This is telling us how much money we're able to walk away with at the end of the day after we factor out vacancy and collection losses and after we subtract out our expenses. But now, what expenses are we subtracting? Again, knowing what these terms are is going to tell you what type of expenses we're going to be subtracting, and it's operating expenses. So net means not expenses. The O means operating, so not operating expenses, not operating. So what are our operating expenses? The operating expenses are going to be everything that the property has to expend every single month or every single year, depending on how we're looking at this here. So it's the expenses that are pretty much locked in where you can't really change that based on who the investor is. So that leaves us really with just a couple of things really, and just really one major kind of area that we're not factoring in here, and that's financing expenses. So interest, discount points, all these different financing expenses, we don't factor in under operating expenses. These are financing expenses, not operation expenses. The operation expenses attribute directly to the operation of the property. So that could be your property taxes. Those have to be paid regardless of who owns the property. It could be your electric bill, your utility bills, any sort of shared elements. If there's parking lights in the parking lot, then somebody's going to have to pay for those, and that's going to be another expense that's there. Those aren't automatically paid for if those lights are on the community type of property. Other types of expenses, maybe you have to have the lawn mowed, maybe you have to have the pool maintained, maybe you have to have a gym gym maintenance contract if we're dealing with a larger type of property. So all these little things that are factored in. There's another big one called reserve for expenses. So our reserve for expenses, this is the money that we're setting aside every single month or every single year, however it is that we're looking at this, the money we're setting aside for the event we have to replace something. Stoves break, washers and dryers breaks, roofs go bad, all these different things that could happen. if we don't set aside money for this, we're going to be in a bad situation when that does come around. So again, this is the stuff you want to be knowledgeable about. If you do want to work with investors, this is what you do need to know. You need to know these different things that could factor in. So when your investor's doing the due diligence, or maybe they're relying on you solely to do the due diligence, this is where you have to go through and look at this with a fine-tooth comb and basically find out whether or not we're getting down to the true net operating income. Because even though this may be prepared already by the listing representative, the person listing the property, or maybe it's just prepared directly by the seller of the property, there could be some inaccurate information in here. And that's why you want to look at these expenses and find out whether or not they're accurate to find out if this is a good investment. But now once we get our net operating income, this is how much money we're able to walk away with. After we take out our expenses, what we're left with as our return on the property for the year. So let's say this $43,200 property. Let's say the expenses are, let's see, you're dealing with a property that's 4 units. Pick a number. Let's say we'll do $2,000 a month in expenses. So that's probably pretty realistic here, because we're dealing with a property that could potentially generate $4,000 a month. $2,000 might even be a little bit too risky of an assessment. Maybe you even want to go higher than that in the real world. But for purposes here and on your exam, it'll give you this information, so you're not left having to just figure this stuff out. That's going to be presented in the question. You just have to figure out how to work with the numbers. So let's figure out that we have, $2,000 in operating expenses. And now here's a tip for you. When you're taking the exam, make sure you're dealing specifically in the same terms. We're dealing with monthly here, then we turn that into annual, and we're dealing all in annual here. So if it's $2,000 a month, you have to make sure that you're notating every single number, whether it's a monthly number or an annual number, because that's a real easy way to make a mistake, and that's a bad mistake to make, whether it's on the exam or in the real world when you're working with an investor. So you take this $2,000 a month, and you're going to multiply it out by 12. So 2,000 times 12, that should give us $24,000 in expenses. And now we're dealing with our annual number here. We have $24,000 worth of annual expenses. So to get down to our NOI, what we're going to do is subtract out this $24,000 expense, and that leaves us with an NOI, a net operating income of, drum roll while I open up the calculator app, $43,200 minus $24,000. We get $19,200. So what we're left with is net operating income is a pretty good $19,200. Now maybe if you're doing this in the real world, you want to look at that, because that might be a suspicious number. So it's good that we maybe have a 200 here. It's not just $19,000 even. So that means that there's a little bit more scientificness to their numbers here, but it ends in a 0. And anytime there's a number ending in a 0 in the real world, that's where you kind of want to raise an eyebrow, and maybe you go back and look at these expenses with a more fine-tooth comb and find out whether these are expenses the owner's making up or whether they are the actual expenses of the property. On your exam, really you just have to know how to work with these numbers, but again, in the even higher level of mastery for working with these numbers when you're trying to work with an investor in the real world. So $19,200 is our net operating income. Now, how do we convert that? Because this is great. We're halfway there in figuring out what our investor wants. But if you remember at the beginning, we weren't talking about net operating income. Sure, the net operating income is great, but what we need to figure out is the ROI. The return on investment. That's the magic word that the investor is looking to solve here. So we got down to our net operating income, but now we need to break this down even further into our return on investment. And we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to work through these final steps basically. You might remember the IRV triangle, or some of you might remember the stack. That's another way this is also taught. But this is basically what's going to get us down to our actual return on investment. So thanks for staying tuned in here. Remember, don't go anywhere. I'm John Carissimo, and you're watching Ask the Instructor.
Are you considering getting your real estate license via one of our classroom courses? At the Tampa School of Real Estate, our courses have been designed to prepare you for the Florida Real Estate Commission licensing exam, as well as teach you about the fundamental aspects of the real estate business. In this class, you'll learn about appraising property values, real estate contracts, the mortgage industry, and much more. We offer multiple class formats and several locations to make getting your real estate license easy. You can complete the course in as little as 2 weeks in one of our day classes. Or if you have a busier schedule, you might prefer our evening classes. All of our classes include the course textbook as well as other supplemental materials. At the Tampa School of Real Estate, all of our instructors undergo a rigorous training program and have real-world real estate experience in order to best prepare you for the class and state exam. We are so confident we have the most comprehensive licensing courses in Florida. We back all of our students with our exclusive 1-year retake guarantee. Our class sizes are limited and tend to fill up quickly, so reserve your seat today with a $49 deposit that will apply towards your course tuition. Registration is easy and just takes a few minutes on our website, tampaschoolofrealestate.com. You can also stop by our administration building or give us a call at 813-928-0106. Our advisors are standing by to answer any questions you have about obtaining your Florida real estate license and starting your exciting new career in real estate.
Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching. Hey, welcome back to the Calculating Real Estate Investment Value episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Carissimo, and this show is brought to you by Tampa School of Real Estate. The reason why we started this show was to help our students. Our students in our classes, whether you're taking an online class or a classroom course, we know that you might need some brushing up on information as we go, or maybe you just want to get into this more in depth like we do here on the show for some of these topics you may want to revisit. So we do this, and even if you're not one of our students, you're welcome to tune in. It's live every Wednesday at 12 noon. You could find this as well as a lot of other helpful articles on our Success Center. That's tampaschoolofrealestate.com/success, tampaschoolofrealestate.com/success. So back into calculating investment value, we're almost to the end of the race here. We've gone from potential gross income down to effective gross income. We then figured out net operating income, and the way we're figuring this out, we went from PGI, our potential gross income, we subtracted out our vacancy and collection losses. So our PGI in this property was $48,000. Then we had to take out our vacancy and collection losses. Our vacancy and collection losses represented 10% in this situation here. So we had to take out our 10% loss due to vacancy and collection losses. And that brings us to our EGI, our effective gross income, of $43,200. And then we're still not done yet. We have to go down to our net operating income, because what we're trying to do is find out what our investors' return on investment is, and in order to find that, we first have to figure out how much money the investor is going to be able to walk away with in this situation. So to get down to our net operating income, we take out all of our expenses that are directly related with operation of the property taxes, utility cost, reserve for replacements, maintenance type of costs for mowing the lawn, the pool, a gym, all these different things that could be different expenses involved in running an investment property. Different things you want to look at before you get into the deal to see if it does make sense and to see if you could get positive cash flow on this property, because ultimately that's what your investors are going to be looking for. But number one, they want to make sure they get positive cash flow, but then number two, they want to know how much positive cash flow in relation to the money they invested. So how much positive cash flow they could get in relation to the money they invested. So we're going to go ahead now and take out some of this stuff here, erase this, give us some room here, because again, we're about halfway done, a little bit more than halfway if we're working through all this here, because this is a little bit lengthier of a process getting to all this information. This is really the easy part now for calculating out this return on investment. And in order to figure this out, we're going to use another kind of triangle-shaped type of device to help you remember this. This thing's really great. Everyone that I've ever taught this to has really loved this. It's called the Irv triangle. So in our Irv triangle, we first draw a triangle, we put a line through the middle here, and what we're left with is I over R times V. So Irv with a little multiplication sign right there in the middle. This is our Irv triangle. Now, why do you want to know how to draw out this triangle? This Irv triangle is going to give us three different formulas we may need. So formula number one, if we're looking for, what you do, you draw out this triangle here, and then you're going to go ahead and circle what it is that you're looking for. So if you're looking for the income of a property, it tells you exactly what the formula is here. So if we're looking for the income, we need to do rate times value. And that's our formula. Income equals rate times value. So that's our first formula this is going to give us. Probably one of the easiest formulas. Another formula we could be looking at here is if we're trying to figure out the value of the property, how much we should pay for it. That's where we're going to circle our V, and now what we're left with is I over R. You want to think of this little thing here as a division sign. On both sides here we have division signs, so you're thinking of this as a division sign, so our value is going to equal I over R. Income over rate. Income divided by rate. So another formula that this little I or V triangle is going to help you remember. Our third formula this is going to help you remember, and all we have left is figuring out the capitalization rate. So figuring out how much return on investment we're going to get on a property. So that's going to be R equals, again, this is just a division sign that we have here, so I, but now we're dividing it by value. We're dividing our income by value. Now, we already went through all the steps over here to figure out what our net operating income is. The only number that's representative of this I is right down here, net operating income. This is our income. It's NOI. Not PGI, not EGI. This is NOI solely. So this is our net operating income. And that's why we have to go through all that work to figure out what the net income is before we can figure out our capitalization rate or before we can figure out what the value we should pay for the property. We're actually going to go through and solve different types of questions for all three of these different formulas that we have here. Whether it's we're looking to find the income of the property, which in this scenario we already have the income, so maybe we're not looking forward to this one. Maybe in this question now we're looking to figure out what the return on investment is or what the value is for this property when we have this certain income and we want a certain capitalization rate. So let's do our first little bit of math here. Let's figure out what the capitalization rate is going to be on this property. So in order to figure out capitalization rate, you need income divided by value. So this is going to be our first one that we're going to do here. Income divided by value. This is meant to find out our return on investment. I use this term capitalization rate. This is another term people use for return on investment. So the R stands for return or rate. It's the percentage number. The R is basically your percentage. It's telling you how much percent the investor is going to get back after putting this money into their property. So in order to figure this out, put this in black here so it'll be a little bit easier for you guys to see. What we need to do is take our income and divide it by the value of the property. Well, we already figured out income, the $19,200. So let's say that this property is listed at $100,000. So we have a list price on this property of $100,000. And we're probably going to have a pretty good return on investment with these little numbers here. Let's make this a little bit trickier. Let's say this is a $200,000 list price, because this is probably too good of an investment. It's probably still too good of an investment at $200,000 for a list price. But let's say it's a $200,000 list price. And in your questions, if you're trying to study for your exam, it'll say the price of the property is $200,000, the net income is $19,200. What is the capitalization rate, or what is the return on investment? Or somehow they might make it a little bit more complex than that, but that's ultimately the simple math that you're going to have to do with this here. So our very basic math that we're going to be doing is just the income, $19,200, and divide that by our value of $200,000. And by just doing this easy calculation here, this is going to tell us what our capitalization rate is going to be for this property. So we have $19,200 divided by $200,000, and we get 0.096. So 0.096 is going to be our quote-unquote capitalization rate, our return on investment. Whatever it is that they're calling this, it's the percentage number in your calculations. So that 0.096, this is the return on investment essentially that we're trying to, that we would achieve if this is a list price of $200,000. But now, this is supposed to be a percentage. What are you talking about, John? That's a decimal. So we have to convert this now into percentage. So simple, carrying over this decimal. This is 9.6% return on our investment. So let's say that this isn't good enough for our investor. So let's say the investor looks at that and says, John, well, 9.6, that is a good return on investment, but I told you I wanted 12% return on investment. So this was our first calculation that we just did here, figuring out what the capitalization rate is based on the list price of $200,000. So the list price is $200,000. It says, John, I need you to find out what I need to pay for this property to get a 12% return on investment. So given this net operating income, because we already researched that, we did our due diligence, and we found that this is an accurate number here, so we know that that's true, but he's saying, hey, I want to know what I should pay for this. So you told me what they want me to pay for this and what return on investment that's going to be, but 9.6%, that's not going to cut it. And that's what's important with investors, is they have an investment objective. They're looking to put their money somewhere and get a certain return on investment. If that return on investment is 12%, they're not going to be happy with you if you say, sorry, that's the best we could do, 9.6%. There's no other properties out there. They're not willing to negotiate, and there's no options. You don't want to be a no person. You don't want to say that there's no other options. You have to use your no so you don't have to say no. Use the KNOW so you don't have to use the NO. What do you know of? Maybe you could negotiate a lower price for the property. So let's say we could negotiate a lower price for this property. Now we're trying to figure out what value or what price we should pay for this property given the income that we want to achieve and the capitalization rate that our investor is looking for, or the return on investment of 12%. So now we're going to do another little bit of math down here. Again, this is all coming from our IRV triangle. So if you're still lost on this IRV triangle, go back, rewind, and make sure you master this IRV triangle, because this is going to help you memorize all three of these formulas over here. So now for figuring out the value, we're going to do our income divided by our capitalization rate. So it's another easy calculation. Like I said, this is the easy stuff if you remember what the formulas are for this. So what value should we pay? What price should we pay for this property to get our investor the 12% return on investment when they're paying $19,200? So in order to do this, we're again just going to do some simple calculations. We're going to do our income, net operating income. Very important that you know this is always net operating income of $19,200. And then we're just going to go ahead and divide this now by the capitalization rate, or the return on investment that our investor is looking to achieve. And our investor said that they wanted 12%. We're not going to divide this by 12. We're going to divide this by 12 as a decimal, which is 0.12. So we're going to go and punch that in our calculator real quick. 19,200 divided by 0.12. And that gives us $160,000. So $160,000 is what we should pay for this property. We should pay only $160,000. So in order to get the return on investment that our investor wants to achieve, that 12%, we have to pay basically $40,000 less for this property. And that's how these formulas could really help you out in the real world, especially if you're dealing with an investor. We need to figure out what the price needed to be. So we went ahead and just took our net operating income divided by our 12% return on investment, and that gives us our $160,000. So our list price is $160,000. The price we need is $160K. So the seller says $200,000. The price says, hey, this is only going to work for my investor if we could do it for $160,000. And you might have a more substantial counteroffer on this when you could explain all of this, when you could say, hey, look, our investor's looking for a 12% return on investment. They really like the property, but it simply doesn't meet their objectives. And this is where another thing where it's very different when we're dealing with investors. When we're dealing with an investor, now it's a business decision. It's nothing personal. You might have the nicest property in the world, but if it doesn't get that return on investment they're looking for, there's no deal. So if they still want to do the deal, they're going to have to negotiate down lower in price to get us closer to that 12% return on investment. It's not that they don't like it and you're going to convince them to like it. It's that it doesn't meet their objectives. And no matter which way, unless you trim down this income, if you lower this income, that's a way to increase this 12%. So that could be another way we look at this here. So let's figure this out. Let's say we get a counteroffer back now. So the list price was $200,000. We did that and we did the calculation to see that 9.6% was our return on investment at a $200,000 sale price. Then we're like, oh no, that's not going to work. Let's figure out what price we need to pay to get our 12% return on investment. And we did that calculation. That gives us the price we should pay of $160,000. But now let's say that the seller counters back again and say, look, I understand that you have a objective that you're trying to meet, but I simply can't sell this property for $160,000. Maybe if you guys could trim some of your expenses or the expenses of the property, then you could make this work and get your 12% return on investment. So or maybe you suggest that as the agent, because the buyers and sellers, that they might be a little bit more emotional about these things. Hopefully they won't be. The investors typically aren't as emotional, but this could still happen. This is where you have to be the logical person here and say, hey, wait a minute, it's not the end of the deal. So it's not the end of the deal that they won't accept the $160,000. Let's figure out what our expenses or what our income needs to be to get us to the counter offer. Let's say they countered back at $180,000. So we started off with our list price of $200,000. We figured we should only pay for $160,000 with the current income that it's generating, but the investor or the seller that owns the property says, hey, look, if you could do $180,000, whatever you need to do to make that work, I'll close the deal. And you tell that to your investor and they say, hey, look, I still want to get my 12% return on investment. So now this is how we're going to look at what the income needs to be at $180,000. This is our third formula from the IRV triangle. This is what the income is given the return and given the value, given our rate and our value. So we know that we want a 12% return on investment, and the seller says that they won't go any lower than $180,000. So our final piece of math here, let's find a place to squeeze this in, is going to be right down here. So we're going to go and copy down our formula. Income equals rate times value. So what income do we need to have to get our 12% return on investment with a $180,000 valuation of the property? So what we're going to go ahead and do here is take our rate of 12%, that's 0.12. Remember to always have your decimal in there when you're working with percentages. And we're going to go ahead and multiply this now by the value that the seller countered at, which is $180,000. So if we're going to try to make this deal work at $180,000 and still get that 12% return on investment, because you really don't want to compromise your investor's return on investment. Unless there's really no other way to get around this, and the only way to make a deal happen, even when you're looking at other properties, is to lower this. Maybe that they're expecting too high of a return on investment. 12% is a pretty lofty expectation for a return on investment. Not to say that it can't be done. It definitely can be. But it might be a little bit higher than what you're able to get in your market. Maybe all the good properties have been snatched up and it's slim picking. So maybe you have to kind of talk to your investor like, hey, look, let's get this down a little bit lower, and then maybe we could trade up once there's a property that opens up and get that larger return on investment. So to figure out what income we need to make this deal work at $180,000, we're going to do our 12%, 0.12, times $180,000, and we would need income of $21,600. So if we get our NOI from $19,200 up to $21,600, and we're not talking a huge sum of money here to get up to that particular point. We're talking just a couple $1,000s really to get from the income that the property is generating to the income we need to get our 12% return on investment. So maybe you talk about this as a long-term strategy. You go back and you recalculate this out. You say, okay, well, Mr. Investor, we figured it was 9.6 to begin with, and you recalculate this out at the current rate with the current income. If we go ahead and do this, we'll have a slightly higher, maybe we're about 10 or 11 of our return on investment. But if we get in there and we could trim some of these expenses and grow our net operating income, all we need to do is get our net operating income up to $21,600 to make this deal work for your investment objective. So that's calculating investment value. This is something you really want to know, whether it's you're taking it on the exam, because this is definitely going to be on the exam in some way, shape, or form, or you see how the practical examples of knowing how to work with these numbers are. They're very simple calculations. I guarantee you the investor knows how to work with these calculations. If you don't know how to work with these calculations, if your investor has to teach you something, they're probably going to not value you highly. And again, going back to that article I put out this morning, you want to create value for your investors. If you create value for your investors, they're going to want to use you, and that's good for you, that's good for them. They get good service, they have somebody they could rely on, and that's good for you because you're going to be generating income from this investor. So it's a win-win situation that you want to aim for, but really the knowledge, this is the first step to making sure, not only just getting licensed. In order to get your real estate license, you need to demonstrate a knowledge of this on your exam, but this is stuff that's definitely going to come up in the real world. Like I said, I've said this a lot on these shows here. Everybody says, oh, you're not going to use this information in the real world. And maybe there's going to be some information that you won't use or doesn't come up in your day-to-day business, but there's so much information in here that is crucial to understanding how the real estate industry works. And that's why you don't want to just trust anyone with your real estate education, and you always want to constantly be learning. If you are interested in starting or enhancing your career in real estate, give us a call. Our phone number is 813-928-0106. That's 813-928-0106. You can visit us on our website. It's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, tampaschoolofrealestate.com. If you're trying to learn more, maybe you already have your real estate license, you're not ready to take any courses yet, but you just want to see some daily tips and tricks to enhance your real estate business or even start your real estate business, check out our Success Center. That's tampaschoolofrealestate.com/success, tampaschoolofrealestate.com/success. All these great resources that we have for you to really help our students in every way we possibly can. I hope you guys have enjoyed the show today. I'm John Carissimo, and you've been watching Ask the Instructor. Remember to tune in next Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be doing a whole another episode of Ask the Instructor. If you guys have a question that didn't get answered on this show, make sure you send it in to us. Email it to info, at tampa-school, tampa-school, the little dash sign, school.com. Again, that's info at tampa-school.com. You can also put it in the comments for these videos. We regularly update these and keep track of them. So go ahead and send us in your questions, and we'll try to answer them here on the show. Again, I'm John Carissimo, and you've been watching Ask the Instructor. Thanks for tuning in today.
Did you know that the Florida real estate license exam usually averages a 50% pass rate? The good news is that you have the opportunity to be a part of the passing 50%. The Florida real estate exam covers three main areas: real estate principles and practices, Florida real estate laws, and general real estate laws. Our exam review class focuses on reinforcing the key concepts of these areas in a fun and engaging way. You'll also learn valuable exam strategies and get lots of practice with real estate math problems. This course includes our exam prep textbook that contains over 600 practice questions to help you prepare for the state exam. And we're so confident that we have the most comprehensive exam prep courses in Florida, we back all of our students with our exclusive 1-year retake guarantee. Our class sizes are limited and tend to fill up quickly, so reserve your seat today. Registration is easy and just takes a few minutes on our website, tampaschoolofrealestate.com. You can also stop by our administration building or give us a call at 813-928-0106. Our advisors are standing by to answer any questions you have about preparing for your Florida real estate license exam and starting your exciting new career in real estate.
Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching.